And then don't worry about students necessarily at first passing and failing. Uh, to me, epic success means that you've created a sense of curiosity in students, and you've also begun to measure their achievement and how well they're able to apply their curiosity. And that technological prowess will come into its own eventually.
Papa Day, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam Podcast, podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. New podcast episodes drop at the beginning of each week. And you can also find my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. All right, today's guest is Dr. James Stanger. He is Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA. He's also a global cybersecurity leader, workforce strategist, author, educator, and one of the most respected voices in translating emerging technology into real-world skills. Dr. Stanger has spent decades at the intersection of technology, education, and workforce development. He has helped design globally recognized certification programs in cybersecurity, networking, cloud computing, data analytics, and emerging technologies. His work has influenced government agencies, private industry, military organizations, and academic institutions around the entire world. What makes Dr. Stanger unique is that he is not just a policy thinker or education theorist, he is also a working technologist. He understands cybersecurity operations, penetration testing, analytics, and real world systems integration. He speaks the language of both engineers and educators. As Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA, one of the world's leading technology industry associations, he focuses on understanding future tech trends and translating them into actionable credentialing, certification, and workforce pipelines. And now he has personally experienced Guam, its strategic position, its people, its education system, and its economic crossroads. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. James Stanger to the Innovate Guam podcast. Dr. Stanger, welcome.
Hey, thanks, man. It's great to be here. Sure appreciate it. Sure appreciate it.
We are so glad to have you. So we have a tradition here on the
Ah,
Innovate Guam podcast. Uh, we ask a couple of icebreaker questions to get a sense of where your head is at in terms of innovation. And the question that I always start off with, I ask all my guests, what is your definition of innovation and what does innovation mean to you personally?
it's fun. Whenever I work with people and talk with them about technology, to me, the most innovative thing that they do is that they map technology to a business need. That may not sound very
Mm.
innovative, but just the need for how should I put this? The cooperation that it shows, the interest in using technology in novel ways, and to kind of map technology to a business need. So in some ways there's nothing cooler than that because it's really putting not only people to work but technology to work.
Absolutely. Now, you're a global technology leader. You've worked with organizations across the globe,
Mm.
from major cities to developing economies. When you first landed in Guam back in February, what was your immediate reaction from a technology and workforce development standpoint?
Well, one of the things that I noticed right away was just uh, through the ACTE and working with all the instructors, just how utterly enthusiastic everybody was and how engaged everybody was. I'm lucky to work with technologists, but also educators around the world, and the enthusiasm that I noticed was it was infectious. And that was really neat to see, and the dedication. I hadn't seen that in a long time. I've seen that in a long time, I should say, but I hadn't seen it in that volume of people. Everybody at the sessions, everybody that I met was so enthusiastic. That was really cool.
Yeah, that was outstanding to have you your first trip out to Guam for the ACTE uh, summit, basically the Career and Technical Education um, Association and their annual summit. It was a great time. It was great to hear your words and stuff over there at University of Guam where it was hosted. Um,
And
so
the
next question.
You
Go
bet.
ahead.
Oh, just the way Sam put together, everything. And there were people from secondary education and from community colleges and from university. It was that kind of cooperation is rare. So yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah. So you call yourself or you label yourself a technology evangelist. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty powerful phrase. Um, can you tell us what you think that means and what does it actually mean to evangelize technology responsibly,
It's really
especially in this area of AI hype and all of that stuff?
all that. It's a really good question because my job is basically to get the word out how technology is used worldwide. So I'm really lucky because I can talk. For example, when I landed in Guam just a while before, I had been in let's see, that I had just been in Singapore and Taiwan, right? Just not too
Mhm.
long before that, just a few weeks before that. And I was lucky enough to talk in Singapore to a bunch of industry leaders. In fact, one person worked for Thales, if you know THELES, they're big, aerospace company. And not too long before that I was able to talk to some folks at BAE Systems and at Boeing. So just to be able to compare notes between those three major aerospace folks, from around the world is really fun. And then when I was in Taiwan and then in Guam, I talked mostly to educators, and so it was really fun to tell people the insights that I had stolen basically from the aerospace industry, right? And tell them, right from the horse's mouths, what they had to say. See, that way, as an evangelist, I'm doing more than, coming up with ideas that I think are clever and more expressing the ideas and the needs of the industry to educate them
Outstanding.
so that they can prepare students. To me, that's the work of an evangelist.
Yes, yes. And you do it so well.
Oh,
You are
yeah.
so passionate. I love the way that your energy comes across. Um, so let's go ahead and start here at the beginning.
Yeah.
Who is James Stanger and what shaped your early interest in technology?
When I was a kid, I used to break things. And in fact, now many, many years later, decades later, I still break stuff. When I was a kid, there's just something about tech that's always just really attracted me, whether it was dad's car that for whatever reason I decided to go in one day and lift it up I mean, I was just a fairly little kid. And even when I was smaller, I would take mom and dad's stereo. I don't know if you were I don't know how old you are, if you remember that mom and dad had a hi-fi stereo, and they would actually say
Yeah.
hi-fi on the side there, and they'd walk into the room much to their chagrin, and there I would be with mom or dad's tools taking stuff apart because I guess I wanted to see what was in there that made that record player work. So I've always loved to see how things work, and hopefully these days I unbreak more things than I break. So I really do love technology, and I love to see how it all works, whether it be ancient, technology like I have an old 1975 Land Cruiser. They look like Jeeps, those old Land Cruisers.
Yeah.
I've got one of
Yeah.
those outside that I usually I break it more than I fix it, but I eventually I get it fixed. And then whether it be technology having to do with, let's say, stuff in the cloud or AI, it's getting underneath the hood of the tech. That to me is fun.
Now, you've had a really broad and diverse career that spans everything from cybersecurity, data analytics,
Uh-huh.
credentialing, authorship, and education. Was it intentional or did it just kind of evolve more organically?
I think it evolved organically. I originally got my degree. I call them my 3 degrees of unemployment. I got let's see, a degree in a BA in English, a master's in English, and a PhD in English. And by 1997, I had gotten what we had 2 3/4 kids at that point. Yeah, about that, right? We had kids on the way, and I kind of realized I need to get back into tech where I went. There wasn't as much, at least what I found, in terms of going into humanities. So I kind of took stock and I said to myself, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep things going? And so I'd always been interested in tech. I'd always done a lot of computer stuff. Even by then, I was kind of the unofficial computer support system for the whole department. I mean, they
Mm.
had to act the real people. And they were incredibly talented, but a lot of times it'd be, "Hey, Stanger, can you help me with this thing?" And so and after a while, I started asking the people, the tech support people, "Hey, tell me about this firewall stuff." And after a while, I got pretty good at that. So hopefully I'm answering your question. The journey that I started just came out of just sheer curiosity. Just loved hearing about how tech worked. And back then, obviously tech had been around a long time back in the 90s, but in the late 90s. But what I noticed is what with the internet having really taken hold by then publicly, and I saw the security side of things to be particularly interesting. And so I just kind of delved in that as much as I possibly could. But I also, in taking stock, I knew I was a good researcher. So I was able to research about technology, but I was also a fairly a good educator. I'd already won awards as an educator. And so I asked myself, is there a way I can take that interest in technology and also my ability, kind of some proven ability as an educator, and put that together? And that's how I kind of started on this journey.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. You think somebody who has a bachelor's or master's and a PhD in English,
Yeah.
right, becomes a technology evangelist and technology guru. It just shows that, we're not one dimensional either way.
Yeah.
We're multifaceted beings, and you can
Yeah.
find ways of connecting tech with the humanities, with this, with that, with it's amazing what kind of connections you can make.
That's right. And it's also never too late. I thought, man, it's just, so many of the people that I'm talking with are younger than I am and things like that. What could I really do? And what I found was, again, through curiosity, but also getting the right education going, right? It allowed me to kind of leapfrog and get ahead. And also, I took a look at the previous experience I had. And that's one thing I've noticed about some of the best technologists. They didn't come in from a storied university, or they didn't come in from a traditional education. They were people who were really good at Uber drivers, and then they made the switch from being an Uber driver, let's say, to help desk, which, you basically do the same thing. A ticket comes and you fulfill it, right? Like an Uber, right? Well, a ticket comes
Right.
and you fulfill it. You figure it out. So you have relevant past experience that you may not realize.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about CompTIA. All
Yeah.
right. So for those who might not know, can you tell us about what CompTIA is, its beginnings, and kind of how it's evolved and where it is right now?
You bet. We're an upskilling company. We teach people how to use technology in a business situation or in a critical situation. We started back in the oh gosh, it was late 80s, in the 1990s, in something where basically back then there were a bunch of companies, some of whom still exist in one form or the other. IBM, HP, Dell, and many of these companies had their own help desk problems, and they sold a lot of hardware. Now, think of this. Back then, PCs were even more expensive than they are now. A good PC would run you back then a good $2,500. And I'm talking in the 90s or whatever. Now, think about that. Adjust that for inflation. We're talking huge money. And long story
Yes.
short, they were all gathered together at meetings at CompTIA. We ran an association then. And in our name, they were all sitting around. And even though they were frenemies or co-opetitors or whatever you want to call it, competitors, they all kind of realized they all had the same program and the same problem, in that their help desk people, a lot of their support partners were not as savvy at PCs back then and computing back then as they needed to be. Long story short, we said, why are you creating all of these individual education programs, each of you at great expense? You don't know how to maintain them because you sell hardware. You put together PCs, but you're not an education company. We can do that for you. And that started CompTIA, and we created A plus out of that, which taught people professional level help desk. That way, those companies solve the problem of some worker going, well, it looks like you have a bad power supply, when actually it was a bad video card. And see,
Mm.
it really was ruining the company's kind of reputations out there because their technicians weren't what they needed to be. And A plus, which back then taught break fix, helped people solve that problem, solved a huge industry problem, so much so that it started CompTIA. Now we have morphed a dozen times, if not more times since then. A plus is not about break fix anymore with video cards so much as it is troubleshooting more modern systems. And we have since then been asked by industry to do that same thing that we did for help desk for various job roles, cloud for cybersecurity, for data analytics, you name it. And so that's why Security Plus remains the kind of de facto standard for people who are entering a career in technology. And for those who decide to go into cybersecurity, it's a great jump off to more specific training, even than that.
Yes, and still, I think a lot of people think A plus is kind of the standard. If you have an interest in IT and you want to find a way to break into the IT world, the first thing somebody's going to suggest you do is go and get a CompTIA certification A plus. And of course, your suite of different certifications, that's how people move up in
That's
the IT field by showing they've completed these different CompTIA certifications to move up in their career and get better jobs and more responsibility.
That's right. When I first started, believe it or not, I didn't know much about A plus. I really didn't know about it. It was not something that said, "Hey James, as you get started, you need that tech foundation." So many of the so much of the training that was available to me basically said, "Okay, get started here," but there was no here. You know what I'm trying to say? They said here, and they didn't say here's where you get started at this level. I wish Tech Plus, a is another course that basically gets people to move from being consumers of tech to being producers. I wish Tech Plus existed then, or I knew about A Plus. It would have made my life so much easier. And you're right. Something like, oh, good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm glad you told me about that Tech Plus because I was going to ask you in 2026, is A plus still the de facto entry point? Like if you're somebody who wants to make a career change out of you name whatever career
Mhm.
field into the IT world and wants to kind of get the baseline understanding, is it still A plus or do you have something else? And it sounds like Tech Plus is the new
It could be a
um
great way to go. It could be a great way to go. I always say when it comes to your career journey, right? Your tech journey, there's got to be more than one way to do it. And when I say more than one way to do it, enter the career pathway. We're really big at pathways at CompTIA, and you got to get on that pathway where it makes sense. And Tech Plus is not at a really a professional. It starts you on your professional journey. Let's put it that way. Uh, because it teaches you the essentials of networking, the essentials of data, a little bit about programming. Like at the end of it, you won't be a programmer, but you'll understand what it means to compile code and how code is interpreted and put together. And you'll be able to read a little bit of code and go, "Oh, I can, let me tell you about this if this if then loop or something like that." It's kind of cool. But it teaches you a little bit about cybersecurity. So the initial pillars of IT. What A plus does is that it starts at a professional level saying you understand endpoints at a professional level. And when I say endpoints, I mean, your good old fashioned mobile phone or your
yes,
workstation, whether it be a
yes.
Mac or your Apple system or Windows. It teaches you endpoints. So there's two ways to look at A plus. In that it can teach you help desk, sure, but it also you got to know all the different hosts, the endpoints that are out there. And that includes things like servers and how things are working in the cloud and virtualization. Then you move on to Network Plus because that teaches how the endpoints all work together. And then you move on to Security Plus, how you can secure. So there's your pathway. And to some people, they may be ready for A plus. They just, for whatever reason in their history, their personal history, hey, I'm ready for A plus. But sometimes we think we found at CompTIA that's a really big first step for some people to take.
Yeah, big
That's why
step. Yeah.
yeah, that's why we created Tech Plus. It gives you the entire kind of horizon of expectations for what you can do with tech.
Yeah, that's a great intel and overview
Yeah.
of the pathways,
Well, thank
there. Um, can you talk about kind of where you are right now? There's a good evolution. I think I've heard like within the last year or two,
Mhm.
you all have been bought
Oh, that's
by
right. Yeah, that's
an
right.
outside group and spun off different aspects of the organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You bet. We started as an association many years ago, back in the 80s, 90s, right? And since then, we moved on, and our association was split into two basic halves after a while. It just kind of was a part of its natural evolution. And as part of this natural evolution, there was a side that focused on what it meant to upskill people, which is a side that I mostly worked on. The other side was had to do with managed service providers, MSPs. And MSP is a uh, a company. Could be a large one, Solar Winds, for example, or Service Now. Could be a very small one that does work. For example, my brother is a CPA, and he doesn't know a whole lot about computing, but he runs a business that needs people to come in and say, well, let me fix your PC for you. Let me make sure you're on the web. We can put together a website for you, right? He doesn't want to do those stuff, so he gives that job to a managed service provider who provides those kinds of services. So
Hmm.
the half of our company organization, CompTIA, when we were a nonprofit, focused on upskilling, and then the other half focused on working with those managed service providers. Well, starting a couple of years ago, we started engaging in discussions that said, because we noticed over the years that those two parts of CompTIA, while we worked together really well, and I was really lucky, I worked on both sides of that house. When I say house, both sides, the upskilling side and the MSP industry side of things. It was really fun to do both. But after a while, we realized that the two activities were separate enough to where we could be separate companies. So working with private equity folks, let's see, HIG is one of them, and the other was Toma Bravo. And you can look them up, HIG, H.I.G, and also Toma, Thoma, and then Bravo, Bravo. We basically worked out a deal where the association can go on to be an association and work with the managed service providers as a nonprofit. And then we became a for-profit company. We were able to focus completely on upskilling. And so we still, communicate with those folks. They're called the GTIA, but they're a completely separate company now. And we realize that it just allows us to focus on what we each do best. I don't know if that helps. So,
No, that was a great overview. It really seems like you carved out a niche and became the gold standard for vendor neutral certifications. And in that realm where, everybody's focused on all these different aspects of technology and all of these different technology systems,
mhm.
you all kind of arose as kind of the person, the group that could help people understand on a generic level this is how these things work.
That's right. And it really does help people really clearly understand where they can go because we offer these education pathways, and it really helps put people at ease really as they learn because learning this stuff is challenging. I would never say that learning tech is just easy and oh, don't worry about it. It's a struggle. At least it was for me. But it's a struggle that's well worthwhile. And so at CompTIA, the reason why we've just focused on the upskilling side is we make it possible for people to not only enter professions but also cross skill themselves. Let's say there are people, for example, I think his name is Marcus at the U.S. Navy base Guam. He works for the hospital there, and Gus. named Gus, and he was talking to me about when he started his CompTIA journey. This was years ago, probably 25 or so, 30 years ago, and how he's been kind of focusing on upskilling himself and cross-skilling himself. So it's neat to see people start with CompTIA and continue to CompTIA, keep learning and honing their skills.
Yes, awesome. So let's shift gears now and talk about kind of the future of technology, right?
Yeah.
So we're in an era defined by AI and automation, cybersecurity threats, cloud infrastructure, data analytics, and all that great stuff, right? From your vantage point, what are the three most important technological shifts happening right now?
Okay, a couple of them. AI is a really important shift, and what it has done is it has kind of it has reflected the fact of how sped up things are. One example I'll use is certainly before our time, believe it or not, I'm old, but I'm not quite this old. Uh, in around the 1900 time frame to about 1925 or so, there was a 25 or even 30 up to 1930 long period where the world moved from blacksmiths, right, to mechanics, right? They move from horse and buggy to mechanics, to cars, if that makes
Yes.
sense, right? What we're seeing with AI is, and instead of it taking 30 years, an entire generation to make that shift, because in 1900 there were way more blacksmiths than there were mechanics. Well, by 1930 it had flipped. Okay, what we're seeing is in a period of 30 months, radical shifts happening in terms of
Mm,
expectation and things like that. Imagine the 30 months that you saw where AI became popularized when ChatGPT entered the storm, versus
right.
what's happening now. So AI is certainly something that has sped things up. Whether it's changing job roles or not, um, it's affecting what we're doing within job roles. Whether there are brand new job roles that are coming out of I would argue not so much. I don't know if that makes any sense. Uh, if that makes sense, Robert. I'm not sure that what we're seeing is brand new, AI job roles. There are some of those, but what's happening is existing job roles. For example, in help desk, in cloud, in cybersecurity, and I'll delve into cybersecurity pen testing and into
Right.
security analytics. What we're doing, if you were to take an A/B test, like A of cybersecurity pen testing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we'll say 10 years ago, and cybersecurity pen testing now, you'd actually see some of the activities within that job role change because AI is creating efficiencies. So that's a very real.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
So it,
Yeah,
it really emphasizes act the aspect is it's not like all of these new quote unquote AI jobs are going to be created and all of these other jobs are going to be destroyed. It really is that the jobs that you used to do are being done in a completely new way.
that's
And
right.
the people who understand AI to understand how to adapt and leverage this new way and new possibilities of doing the job, those are the people who are going to survive. The folks who kind of bury their heads in the sand and keep doing the same job the same way are going to
Not gonna
get
work.
left.
That's right. That's right. So there's a couple of things that AI does. First, it makes things more efficient. Efficient means you keep the same process, but AI or some form of automation. And I'm glad, Robert, earlier you mentioned automation because I think that's a really key thing. And let's make sure we go back to that because I think that's one of the second big things that's happening right now. But going back to AI, which is a form of automation, with AI, what's happening is that it makes existing processes more efficient. It can do things faster. For example, cybersecurity threat intelligence. It's a part of security analytics, really. It's the ability to say, okay, we are a bank. And here's how the attackers seem to come after banks right now. And I'm lucky enough to know people who work for various banks around the world, and it could be like you and me. You might be the Bank of Singapore, and I might be Wells Fargo in the United States. We actually, as technologists, call each other up and share cybersecurity threat intelligence, even though we're
Mm,
competitors, because we know it's the best of interest that if I know how they're coming at you, that's probably how they'll come at me, and we share that information and we
right.
benefit each other. I bring this up because while doing that, we share just terabytes of information that a human being can't read in good time. So the process of AI can come in and speed that process up and do the brute force reading and then come back with a hopefully accurate report that says, hey, Robert, I went through a bunch of stuff, while you guys were talking, and here's some relevant information. Man, it helps us find that needle in a haystack. So that's how AI can help speed up processes. But you made a point earlier that with AI, there are entire processes that we just don't even do anymore because somehow bringing in that form of automation, bringing that AI, just changed the process. So within a job role, not only are we seeing people doing existing processes faster, but they'll call it shift left, meaning, well, we don't do that process anymore. And so now everything is just kind of moved this way. Hopefully that's left for you, but it's all moved a certain way.
Yes.
So that beginning steps that used to be a beginning step, we don't do that anymore. AI does it. Does that mean we don't need workers? No, it just means we need workers who can think more architecturally and who can kind of understand what processes are. And I think one of the big things that AI has done is it has required cybersecurity professionals, for example, or data professionals to have more domain knowledge and to understand those processes and to know when to, if not jettison them, change our workflows radically. The workflows that we use nowadays, and when I say workflows, I just mean the processes, the steps to get something done, they've changed. And companies are now,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And companies are, the smart ones are documenting that and saying, well, here's what we think they
Yes.
are. And instead of what we think they are, let's actually start documenting where they are. And that's a big deal right now.
Yes. Yeah. So I put on my Lean Six Sigma black belt
Oh,
hat.
there you go. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what we called them in lean vernacular were buggy whips. So the end of the 20th century,
Yeah.
what we found is a lot of our industrial processes had these quote unquote buggy whips, right? We were taught to do the job this certain way. Process had to be done this certain way. But oh my goodness, it's the end of the 20th century. Industrial processes and technology has advanced so much. Why do we keep doing it this way? We're
Great.
not doing horse-drawn buggy carriages anymore. We're driving an automobile. So you don't need a buggy whip anymore. So why are we making buggy whips? It's waste, right? AI is like speeding up the amount and the time frame in which we're identifying new buggy whips in our processes all over, not just in industrial operations, but in every aspect of life. It's creating buggy whips like on a daily basis almost.
Big time, fantastic way to put it. When I was at RSA San Francisco this past, I think it was March, so a couple of months ago, and the two things that they noted were exactly what you're talking about, how quickly processes are being changed. And the second one was it challenged you not only to document your processes, but to find out what it means to create an agent of yourself or to use agents to start
Yes.
duplicating yourself. So that's interesting to
Yes.
see how this time last year, sure, people talked about agentics and I would talk about it, but it wasn't fully democratized. It's a word I've been using a lot
Right.
lately. Democratization, folks, simply means this: some element, whether it be an element of AI or some technology that was only available to just a certain few, maybe in a huge government or in a huge company, then suddenly it's in Cracker Jacks boxes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you and I've seen things democratized that way, and that process sometimes is so slow it's hard to tell. Well, now it's almost going on so fast.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, so that's a big deal. So I think AI is one of the first things. The second thing you mentioned, automation, and I'm talking about the idea of the use of kind of a DevOps, DevSecOps kind of thing, containers, Kubernetes, the idea of orchestration. You could
Mm.
call this what you want, but the idea of automating our ops becomes so important and
Yes.
the right kind of foundation because AI is groovy and all that, and it is. But you have to have the right technological foundation in your organization. I'm not saying everything has to go to the cloud, but I am saying everything has to have the right basis for good automation to take place. You got to get your DNS in a row. You got to get your TCP/IP in a row, and you probably think to yourself, "Wait a minute, that's going to be stuff that's going to be eliminated, James." By AI. It's like, it's the foundation. If you don't get your foundation right, it's just like a home still.
Garbage in, garbage out.
garbage in, garbage out. And if your home is on a bad foundation, trust me, it slides off the cliff and away we go.
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
other thing I will say about going back to AI, if I can remember this, I think it really comes down to us. I was talking 3 years ago to an organization in Europe who should have known better. These leaders, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were saying, "Oh, James, in 2 years, we won't need security analysts anymore." I heard at the Pentagon fairly recently some leader who's leaving, thankfully, saying, we don't need pen testers anymore because AI will do that." I'm just like, once again,
No, no,
well,
no.
you hear this all the time, though. People who should know better. What they are saying is that the job description, yes, is
It's going to change.
changing, and more radically
Yes.
than ever before. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to say it's going away, yeah,
Yeah.
I would argue that the help desk job has gone away, right? And it's been replaced of the help desk job of today, right? It's let's just be grown up about this. So yes, AI is having an impact on jobs for a couple of reasons. One, there are some jobs that have some job roles that are very repeatable and all that. Any form of automation will, including AI, will take that job away. We're also seeing a lot of larger companies having to make bets, like the huge companies like Meta or Alphabet, who owns Google or whatever. They're all making these bets that in the next 5 years, AI will be at this place. So they're kind of like at
Yes.
a poker table. They make a bet, and then 5 years from now, let's say if they were spot on, boom, boy, they're doing great. But if they were off a little bit, then, well, we had to do some layoffs and things. It's
Right.
that betting process that does cost jobs because even though we still need those jobs, these tech companies are making certain bets that thing they're having to lay down more money than ever before for that Annie. I'm sorry to use
That's a
poker.
great way of describing it, and kind of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, to really understanding what's shaping the system, the visible system that we see. Yeah.
So there's that. But the second thing is it possible for workers to get their operations automation together? Because if you, to your point about garbage in, garbage out, if you have processes that are a little bit broken, then you're going to be automating broken processes. And
Right.
you're going to end up automating chaos, and nobody needs
Right.
that. So
Right.
that's the second thing. I think the third thing probably is more nuanced understandings of data. Um, Data analytics used to be something that most companies didn't do because it kind of wasn't available to them on one level or the other. It wasn't available to them either because we weren't training good data analysts. It was more of something, well, it's an art that you learn. It's like, no, no,
Mhm.
it's something you can teach systematically. And then the other thing is that I think a lot of these job roles people are scared to get into because there's a lot of thinking out there that, oh, automation is going to get rid of the need for for cybersecurity workers or get rid of the need for data analytics workers or people who know about automation. We're not seeing that really. We're not seeing that.
Yeah.
Yes, there are
Yeah.
certain areas of help desk where certain jobs uh, have been eliminated, but there were more help desk jobs last month posted in the U.S. anyway than before. We're also
Yeah.
seeing, and so it's interesting to see what's going on. Yeah, there have been tons of layoffs, but again, if you look at it, I noticed in the finance sector, PayPal and another organization that's like PayPal, I can't remember the name of them, they both listed layoffs. But the reason why they were is they admitted, um, they did say, yeah, we're trying to use AI to help us. But that was, of course, the news media went, oh, AI is eliminating more jobs. That's not the case. What happened was these companies were out there doing their thing, and they kind of lost track of customer service. They lost track of their audience and got
Mm.
themselves in trouble, and they got desperate. And so that means other companies came along and kind of ate their lunch for a while. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
That's different
Yeah.
than AI took those jobs. And so if you're in a company that took your eye off the ball and got yourself in trouble, and then you need AI maybe as a, like as a lifeline, I'm drowning and throwing
Yes.
the rope. That's a very different type of thinking. And I think it's very important that we look at those nuances when we hear
Yes.
about news and AI. Anyway, sorry,
Yes.
but I'd throw that
Yeah.
out there.
No, that's great. So let's take this up to a 30,000 foot view,
Okay, got it.
right?
Yeah.
If you were advising a small but strategically important region like Guam, right?
Mm.
What technology sectors should Guam's leaders or Micronesia's leaders really prioritize and invest in?
It's a really good question. The first thing is I've noticed that if you were to take all of the islands, put them together, you'd have a larger land process than what Singapore, land process,
Yes,
land than Singapore. Singapore has invested in its people. So the first thing is find ways to truly invest in your people so that technologically they become incredibly savvy. That's the first step. The second thing is, it's like, okay, James, we'll do that. And what areas should we have them invest in? And I think there are a couple of areas to think about. First of all, cybersecurity has to become less expensive. And instead of just saying, well, AI at the wave of some robotic arm will make things cheaper, right? That's science
uh,
fiction. What could you do as a particular territory, right? To say, look, we are positioned in an incredibly important position, the tip of the spear kind of thing, right? In in this part of the world, what can we do to offer expertise, scintillating expertise in two or three areas? It could be in, kind of that auto operations, putting together, really good excellence in doing DevOps and DevSecOps and things. It could be in a specific cybersecurity analytics sort of thing. It could be in data analytics. See, that way you become a service entity to not just say the Navy or the Marines or the Air Force in the United States, but regionally. You can become an incredible service that for pennies on the dollar does cutting edge work. So you could become basically the outsourced or near shore for Singapore, for example, for anyone. There's tremendous potential there. And the more that you invest in your future, sure, you can then go off island or stay on island, that's fine. But imagine if you were to put together as your particular society, look, here's what we do to invest in our people in, two or three major technological areas. Man, that'd be fantastic. And you don't have to just go after the Googles of the world or the tech companies. You know what I mean by the tech companies like Microsoft
yes,
or just name what are called
the
the top.
Mag 7
Yeah,
types.
yeah. Why not go after the banking sector? Most people would not say that banks are part of the tech sector. Sure, they use tech all day long. In fact, you could argue the finance, I say banks, the finance industry tends to have the most mature use of technology because they really don't like to lose money. So, they came up with two-factor authentication that we all
Yes,
use every day, right? The ATM card plus your password. That's two factors. How long have we been using that? I mean, geez, since the 80s or 70s before.
yeah.
Whereas, in the tech industry, we only started using, two-factor authentication, in a systematic way only, what, 15 years ago? Not even that. So pick a particular industry sector. It could be that you could support manufacturing in a particular region, not just banks. Could be manufacturing. To me, there's tremendous potential that Guam could do. You've got the
Yes,
education.
yes. I'm glad. I really like the idea of turning Guam into like a uh, uh, experimental sandbox, if you will, for cybersecurity.
Oh,
That because we are on the cutting edge. A previous guest from last year, Dan Van Wagenen, who's a cybersecurity expert in the DC area, I had him on the podcast, and he was
yeah.
talking about all of the different activity going on out here with Volt Typhoon and so many others, where we're constantly getting prodded. We're constantly getting,
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
probed and stuff like that because we are the front line of that. And even if we decide, that there's a kinetic war that comes,
Hmm.
that kinetic war is probably going to be preceded by cyber war
Cyber war.
that's going to definitely disrupt, um, destroy,
Big time.
diminish, or whatever different systems in anticipation of or ahead of the kinetic effects that are coming.
There's no question. And think of the areas that might be seen as weaknesses or whatever. The great question, a great point about the idea of kinetic versus cybersecurity warfare. What are some of the skills that can help you in a particular part of the world to be seen as here is an incredibly valuable resource so that way they're not having to fly people in from wherever into Guam. It's like, no,
Yes,
go right in. We saw at a school, it was one of the Catholic schools there, right there in Guam. It was fantastic. I walked in there. There were about a couple of dozen students who were getting their Security Plus, which is unusual for people at a high school level to be getting that. And yet these were folks were doing it not just in a theoretical way, in a very real way. It was exciting to see that. So you have tremendous potential to offer really cutting edge, say, cybersecurity services. Just as long as that resource is there, smart people will pick it up, whether it be in the U.S. military, whether it be U.S. civilian, whether it be in some other country, they'll pick up the service that
yes,
you have there. Yeah, there's no question. That was interesting to see. And I remember my coworker Peter. He basically leads the sales for the entire APAC region. Which includes Guam, but also clear over to India, etc. And he said reinvesting in your people is the biggest thing that Guam can do. And so, a really good way of doing that. Guam could just explode overnight, explode in a good way. So yeah. So
yes, yes, absolutely.
I can't
Yeah,
I can't even help you think of power, for example. We just recently, how are you doing recovering with the latest storm?
yeah, a
I know
lot better for us.
that Dominion, right? Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
with Sinlaku. But again, what I caution folks is remember, Sinlaku slowed down and then kind of went north. So we didn't get the full brunt of it.
Yeah, you were lucky that way.
Unfortunately, our brothers and sisters in the CNMI got the full brunt of it.
They
We
got hit
just kind of
hard.
got the external portions of it. So don't be so quick to, pat ourselves on the back about how quickly we responded and recovered. Now it was interesting because I went to this year's Power Symposium um,
Hmm.
hosted by the Guam Power Authority in concert with the Conference on Island Sustainability. And that first 2-day Power Symposium, it was amazing sitting in there. I will
Yeah.
tell you probably about two-thirds of the content of that 2-day symposium
Yeah.
had to do with cybersecurity and AI in infrastructure. At least two-thirds, if not more.
The industry, the power industry specifically, has woken up and realized that cybersecurity is the thing, and it's very important. In fact, we're coming out with something called Sec OT Plus. We've been working on this for some time, and it means cybersecurity with operational technology. Operational technology,
Mm,
to your point about power, operational technology, right? You know this as well as I do. It's the use of a computer, some sort of cyber computer to control the electrical grid, for example, or to
right,
control the pressure within a pipeline. It's
right.
that critical infrastructure side of things that has become so important, incredibly important. And there's a couple of things there. First of all, IT folks know a lot about cybersecurity as you know it. Operational people, technology people less so. So it's two very different cultures. And what we need
Right.
to do is to get both cultures to understand things. And when I
Yes.
say things, IT people need to understand the SCADA world and the world of
Yes.
operational technology. And the people of
Yeah.
operational technology need to understand, okay, what does this security thing mean? It's two very different cultures. One's not better or worser than the other, but they're just different. They need to work together.
Yeah, that was interesting to see.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what were they? What are some of the things that they were talking about? Because that's really I've noticed that in my travels, I've noticing the same thing from the in this case from
Well, without getting into any classified information or
okay,
anything, we know that there has been probing of Guam's uh, um,
infrastructure.
utilities
Yeah.
infrastructure, right? So we know that. Um,
Yep.
so we have to think about security of our infrastructure, power grid, et cetera, in broader standpoint, not just the resiliency in terms of being able to withstand and recover quickly from typhoons and earthquakes and all of that, but we have a very real and persistent cyber threat that's going on.
Yeah.
So what they did a good job of during the power symposium is under this idea of power resiliency. Um, it was not just natural disasters, it was also malicious cyber piece. And it was
Man-made
all
disasters.
wrapped up
Yeah.
into the idea of resiliency.
Yeah. Very so nicely put. So nicely put. Because, for example, operational technology people, in terms of resilience, they kind of chuckle a little bit at IT workers. IT workers, Robert, we strive for the 4 nines or the 5 nines. You know what I mean? We think, and that's incredibly expensive. What is it? 99.9 is the 3 nines,
Yes,
99.99 is the four. You know this,
yes,
Robert, way better than I do,
yes.
but each time you add a nine there, it gets incredibly more
It's
expensive.
expensive. Yes,
And the operational technology side, they're like, well, of course it works. It's OT. Their understanding of infrastructure is like, well, if it's not 100%, people die. So they kind of chuckle at the OT at the at the IT people. Why are you struggling at this 5 9 so much? Yet the IT people kind of chuckle at the operational technology people because many of the operational technology people don't put in access controls. We talked about 2FA.
yes.
We don't have that. So now you have operational technology systems that are shipping with IT technology all being worked together, and it's going to create something that's much more hackable than ever before. So these are the problems that need to be worked through. There are fixes, but it ain't easy.
Yeah, and even in the logistics equipment and infrastructure, like with the port, one of the challenges that the Port of Guam had is we have these old cranes, these old gantry cranes that should have
Yes,
already been recapitalized. Problem is, there's nobody in the United States that make that anymore. All that is built in China and North Korea. I mean, North
that's right.
Korea, South Korea,
South Korea probably,
and
yeah.
other places.
Yeah.
Yeah, South Korea. Um,
Oh,
so they ran into a lot of problems with like the Buy America Act and trying to get a waiver from that in order to buy it. It's like, who do you want me to buy it from? There's nobody in America I can buy it from. But then it brings in a whole host of these concerns that are legitimate.
that's
Okay, if
right.
I'm buying this equipment from um, um, China,
Hmm.
what do I need to do now from a cybersecurity standpoint to make sure that this is quote unquote safe, that it's good? So it makes you start thinking about what tests do I run? How do I probe this? Do I um, buy it minus some of the electronic pieces and then try to integrate that later? Oh my God, that's a whole nother technology project with a huge price tag. So how do I go about figuring out how I'm going to secure that system, from a cyber standpoint, which I know a few years ago, people wouldn't even be thinking about this. On
That's
some
right.
cranes, you know,
Oh, no,
yeah,
yeah, it's a serious issue, and it starts kind of bringing up the idea of supply chains. As the supply
yes,
chain comes to us, in your case, you could call it a very niche or idiosyncratic or one-time supply chain issue, but that's a huge issue because you're an island and you got to get stuff off
yes.
and on that island, especially on.
90% of our stuff comes through that port.
Right.
That is our biggest threat. There's a lot of people have made all kind of different arguments about what Guam's major threat is, but I tend to believe it's supply chain. Any kind of supply chain disruption, we got 90% of our goods coming through the port. What happens if those supply chains get interdicted, disrupted, or severed? Even for I mean, maybe we can go a couple weeks, but I think on some of the most critical stuff that we have on island, there's not much more than 30 to 45 days worth.
And it's not like you have a separate airport close by where you can do drops. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are situations historically where, okay, we'll do airlifts and stuff like that. Well, it's a little bit different when you're that far out. And from a microcosm perspective, you are addressing the same exact issues that I hear people talking in the Pentagon, at the Thailand NCSC, in Singapore. I'm going to Australia here next week, talking about the exact same things to the Australian Signal Corps. Australia is a slightly bigger island than Guam. I'm aware of that, but the concerns remain the same, right? And so
Slightly.
and so you could argue, well, we're so small we can't solve that problem. Well, I hear the opposite. Well, we're so big we can't solve that problem. No, no, no. You can solve the problem if you work on it and if you have the right
Yeah.
trained people. And that's the key here.
Right. All right, let's shift gears
Sure,
and
man.
go back to kind of something that you were emphasizing before. That's really career and technical education
Yeah,
implications for Guam, right? So you've seen CTE evolve globally.
yeah.
How has career and technical education changed in the last 20 years from what you've seen?
One of the first things is more hands-on. There's the opportunity to do better and more hands-on training rather than just lecture type training. I'm trying to say it used to be years ago. Well, how do I get that system? Whether that system be back then it'd be maybe a firewall or a database server. How can I get that into the classroom? And that sounds easy. Well, just get a old computer and set it up. That might work to teach help desk to do that. But as far as higher end skills and the answer, and how do I keep that hands on? Well, nowadays with virtualization, you can virtualize using, VirtualBox or using the cloud or using VMware or whatever, very sophisticated setups and get them into the classroom right away. So it's that hands on, the opportunity anyway, to get more hands on. That's been a major change. And sorry, maybe that's not quite the direction you wanted to go in, but from a
No, no, no. That's
perspective,
actually good,
yeah.
good way to think about it, and also talks about some of the power of virtualization. Yeah, yeah.
So
So
that's exciting.
what separates these high performing CTE ecosystems from struggling ones? Because you're talking about the aspect of virtualization. What are those things that are different in these
Yeah.
high performance CTE ecosystems?
It's a really good question. I think, first of all, I think there's two pieces of it. One, are you sourcing a really good body of knowledge or source of truth? Anybody who does database work or anybody who does work from a business intelligence perspective, they'll actually use the word source of truth. And we're not getting into Plato here or religion here. We're getting into, okay, where is your base of knowledge that we can work from? So I'm just drawing an
Right,
analogy between, data analysts and education. From an education perspective, what's your source of authority in terms of what's important and what to learn? At CompTIA, of course, I work for CompTIA. Any organization that does a great job capturing the wisdom of the of technologists, the wisdom of how, for example, security analytics works, or the wisdom of how data analytics works, or what does it mean to be a good cloud worker? So that's the first thing. Are you really using an authoritative body of knowledge that changes with the times, that's captured correctly? By captured, I mean, where does CompTIA get its stuff? Well, we've got a process where we literally, virtually and physically will lock hundreds of subject matter experts in the room, and we won't let them out. We feed them occasionally. We won't let them out until we get their wisdom. So when you read CompTIA objectives, it's not just you and me, Robert, a couple of mad scientists saying, "Oh yeah, that's important. Let's do that." We distill that wisdom down into our objectives from hundreds of working professionals, if not thousands. So so the first step of a good cutting edge program is choosing the right kind of body of knowledge to work from. Um, a lot of different good cert bodies out there, education bodies, but I would argue you need ones that there are certain characteristics of high quality programs. The second is the hands-on side of it or how it's taught. And so, do you have good adaptive learning? And by adaptive, I've taken courses where it's like, yeah, I've learned this. How many times do I have to learn that? Well, if it's adaptive, well, look, Robert, you did your pre-exam, some quizzes and things. We know what you know. We're not going to reteach you something unless we really think it's necessary. And so it has to be
Yeah, I
adapted.
love doing that approach as a dive instructor. So
Ah,
the SSI dive um, training material, education material is like that. You give them the e-material, you do that on your own. So when you show up with your dive instructor, it's assumed, okay, let you've gone through that. Is there any questions? And then I'm going to kind of ask you some questions and get a sense of how well you understood the material or whatever. And then we kind of go from there based upon how you answer those kind of things.
it's that kind of interactive thing that it gives the, and you said SSI?
SSI,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm a solo diver with SSI, and I think a trimix diver with SSI.
Ah,
So yeah.
okay. Fellow diver here.
Yeah, and it
Yes.
was great to do that. They were one of the first to do exactly what you're describing. And we've
Yes.
seen good education folks on the IT side do something very similar. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, what role do you think that industry certifications play inside high schools, secondary schools, community colleges, and um, even specifically CompTIA pathways inside high schools and post-secondary education?
To me, it comes down to authority, clarity, and scalability. Okay, we know it came from a good authoritative body, CompTIA or ISACA or some Sans GIAC, a good you know organization like that. We know it's authoritative. We know it's clearly stated. It's like, okay, it's not just a vague idea. This comes from when I say this, the body of knowledge comes from a job task analysis, fancy phrase for saying, okay, you're doing a job. What are the tasks involved in that? What are the skills and what does competence look like? And then scalability, the ability to say, look, this isn't just some training that you pay $8,500 US for. That's not very scalable. I mean, that would destroy people's budgets, right? What can
Yeah,
we do through technologies, whether it be cyber ranges, whether it be through uh, virtual labs, to make these tasks and learning these things, which used to be really difficult, and I should say difficult, very expensive to do. How can we scale it so that it's actually not something that's too expensive and that any organization, no matter how badly funded or how well funded, can be at the same level? It's all about fairness to me. And this idea of democratizing learning to me, it simply makes it possible for you to have the same access to the scintillating hands-on kinds of activities that everybody else has access to. It's really kind of passionate for me. That's why I love how as we have been working under private equity, we have the power to make that possible. It's a
mm,
heck of a position to be in. Very nice position.
absolutely, absolutely. It sounds like this is a really great approach for Guam. It's like this is a way to invest in our young people and invest in them early in a very structured, deliberate kind of way.
Mhm.
Um, we don't have to wait until they're already out in the workforce. If we build in some kind of deliberate process through, starting in high school to get them ready for um,
Big time.
the workforce, and then to kind of build on that through the pathway approach, that we're going to have a lot better um, um, workforce that's going to be able to be usable in a lot of different ways.
Very much so. And I think to expand on what you're talking about, it really makes it possible to give troubleshooting skills to students. And in other words, it's like because earlier we talked about how skills are moving very fast, from a
Right.
30-month perspective or even 3 months. It's very quick. So what is left behind that people need to learn? When I say left behind, if the individual skills change so fast, what is the bedrock that really allows people to go, okay, I see what's coming at me. I know what it is. And one of them is the
Yeah.
fundamental ability to troubleshoot and solve problems. My wife is a tremendous problem solver. And I've noticed that increasingly that agility and that creativity, I'll often hear from CIOs, we want agile workers and creative workers. And I'm like, okay, let's get that from abstract down to something specific. And each time they talk about it, from job role to job role, they're really talking about people who know, who kind of have that troubleshooting
I know the
fifth element in
troubleshoot.
them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that to me, it goes back to hands-on, but it goes back also to people once they have that. Think about it. You've got now people who are 19 years old, 21 years old, etc. They could decide to become a medical doctor. They could decide to do something working for the docs or what have you. But if you have this kind of cultural shift that goes on, and I mean cultural shift in terms of education, into troubleshooting and really understanding that you've got priceless students that will go in and impact whatever job role they go into. That's really unique and really priceless and really
So
very
how do you build that into your education system and produce groups of people who are um, really good, very competent and confident at troubleshooting,
one of the
problem
first.
solving,
It's a good question. I one of the first
critical
things.
analysis,
Yeah,
critical thinking?
one of the first things that I've done in the classrooms is I stole this from the electricians. Electricians, people they walk into a room and they can wire a room and stuff like that. Do you know how they teach electricians the first day? You'd think that they would sit them down and say, "Hey, safety is really important. Otherwise, you're going to electrocute yourself," right? They actually, in a lower voltage environment, they actually say, "Look, here is the equipment you're going to be using for the rest of your life." They hand it to you, and you start wiring stuff the first day. Now they have it under a controlled situation so you don't electrocute yourself. But the first thing they're like, okay, now what am I doing here? It's like, well, you're wiring together, a certain amount of voltage, and here's the standard ways that you do it. Very first thing. So it's all about hands-on. To me, that's the key. Then after they spend about 20 minutes doing that, almost right off the bat, like, "Hi, I'm James, and well, here's some equipment." And then they step back and said, "Do you know what you did?" And they're like, sort of, maybe. And then they sit there and they explain the concepts, and then they have them right away go back to hands-on. And I think it's that kind of back and forth between hands-on and learning that creates that troubleshooting mindset. I don't know
Outstanding.
if that answers your question, Robert, if that's very
Yeah,
clear.
yeah, that's a good way to do the, but we've got to get out of the industrial age education system where it's
Yeah.
teacher in the front of the room, students at your desk, follow instructions and listen and do what I tell you to do, to this. Let me teach you how to think. Let me teach you how to problem solve. Let me teach you how to troubleshoot uh, in your own brain through your own
That's
assessment of the situation. I think we're still kind of struggling with that
No, I
to
think you're
make
right.
that shift.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of the sage on the stage kind of approach rather than getting people, practically involved in it. And when I say involved in the technology, I've noticed there are a couple of things. People are kind of like uh, people in technology are kind of similar. If we are not, how should I put this? If we're not properly engaged, we get up to mischief. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yes,
That's what
yes,
we do,
yes.
right?
You're absolutely right.
And
You're
and
absolutely right.
and proper engagement at times can be that traditional, model, but increasingly it isn't. Attention spans are shorter. The need to get stuff done has collapsed. It's tromboned, as it were, not out but in. And so I think it really is that various clever ways of that hands-on training that really gets people engaged. For example, next week I'll be talking to a bunch of military workers, and for the first day I'll be doing some training. Well, these guys, they join the military. When I say these guys, there are women in there, there are men in there, there's various folks in there. And
Hmm.
they started in there because they want to do kinetic things. By kinetic, they want to do stuff. It's physical. They don't want to sit and get lectured. Um,
Right.
and they're an example, actually. It's not just in the military that you have that kind of situation. You see it with high school students from various walks of life. And so the question becomes, how do you not necessarily edutain them, but how can you get them physically learning this stuff? Because that way the technology is not just lying around getting in trouble either. AI, left to itself, gets into nothing but trouble. But proper engagement with the technology. And I think that the entire the education industry, and I'm not just pointing, fingers at, secondary or post-secondary or university. I'm talking about learning centers and just the very tech education industry. frankly hasn't moved the needle as much as it needs to. And that's an
Right.
exciting opportunity at CompTIA to show people what appropriate education for the conditions is. And those conditions meaning could be a very physical operational technology. It could be for our auto ops course, which is all about how to set proper foundational automation. Could be for A plus, could be for security plus. It's the appropriate level of education, and it all starts with hands-on and kind of ends with hands-on, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to Guam's educators on how to modernize their technology programs? And then jump forward, how do you leverage that in order to um, maybe have a concrete and workable plan to have Guam grow into this Pacific hub for cybersecurity talent? What steps, what would you do? What would be the main things that you advise that this is what you need to do?
Clearly outline what the skills pathways are right now. Find out what those are. One, and don't worry, well, but how will that be applied in Guam? Don't worry about that. That'll happen naturally. That will happen. So, first of all, get a clear understanding of what the important skill sets are. Two, adjust your education on some level. It can be something very modest, it could be something very radical, but adjust your education so that students right away are getting involved in a physical way, this technology and how it works. Um, Let them play with it, create situations. We all have playgrounds, right? I grew up around
Yeah.
playgrounds. Create tech playgrounds on one level or the other. I think one of the easiest ways to do that, we offer and various organizations do this. Virtual labs. It used to be setting up a lab. It's like, well, my gosh, where do I get the computers and how do I get the skills? And it takes forever, a whole day. I remember it would set when I went and did a training, a 5-day training. I'd show up 2 days early to set up the lab for 2 days so that it could be set up for the 5-day training. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Nowadays, you don't have to do
Yes.
that so much with virtualization. It's we have offerings that right away drop students into those situations. So it teaches just as much as anything physical. And so it's that sort of thing. So create technological playgrounds is the next one. You know, good body knowledge, technological playgrounds. And then don't worry about students necessarily at first passing and failing. Uh, to me, epic success means that you've created a sense of curiosity in students, and you've also begun to measure their achievement and how well they're able to apply their curiosity. And that technological prowess will come into its own eventually. That way,
Okay.
if they're playing and they're really looking at and they're really engaging in things, a lot of that technological skill will come about automatically. And then at the end, you need to find some good way to assess that skill. You can't just say, okay, we went into the playground, move on, you're done. It's like, okay, we did the playground. Now notice, let's take stock in what you've learned. And they're based on those objectives. See, now you have students that are really feel conversant and they have what I call muscle memory troubleshooting. They have muscle memory of various technologies. That's the important bit. Then you can start to assess them and find out where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about the cybersecurity sandbox kind of idea. We talked about the need to change kind of the way that we educate people uh, during this period. What other specific advice would you have for Guam's leaders in government, private sector, education, and academia? What kind of main things do you really want to leave for our leaders?
You bet. One of the first things is share ideas. Work together as educators to share ideas with each other. But I'm a big fan of in the same way I'm a big fan of cross skilling. I'm a big fan of cross fertilization of ideas. And by that, try to get more specific. Um, Educators should be talking to industry leaders more, or at
Mm,
least workers in the industry.
it's ACTE. Yes.
Well, and to me, it's just a fantastic model
Yes.
because now, It's great for instructors to steal ideas from each other, and I'm always stealing ideas from instructors. It's great, and hopefully they can steal a couple of ideas I've stolen. But the thing is the idea of listening to what industry leaders are looking for. Like lately, industry leaders will say, we need people who can map a technological, solution. And we need people who can map that to a business process, to a business goal. Well, a lot of instructors, some instructors might, oh no, I know where you're going with that. I can do it. Others would go, I'm not sure I know what that business goal would look like. And what are the steps in mapping those two together? You get somebody from the industry to talk about that. And then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, the covers were taken away from my eyes. I now see what I can do. It's that kind of cross fertilization. I think that's really important. So
Right.
I think that's a really important find ways to talk with industry more. And there are a couple of ways to do that are pretty easy. Once you get to know somebody out in the industry, and that could be a local person in Guam, get them to come in the classroom, start a Zoom session with the
Yes.
classroom and have them listen and ask some of those tough questions. What are some of
Yes.
the things every day that you do with this technology that we're showing them, with this Linux stuff, with this cloud stuff, with this data analytics? What business solutions do you solve with this stuff? And once the students see it, oh my gosh, their imaginations will absolutely be kindled. And that's really our job, as educators, is to do that.
Yeah. Great words, great words. All right. Before we wrap up, I kind of want to do a rapid fire
Oh, cool.
round with you here, right? So this rapid fire round is going to be focused on the future. All right. So I
Okay.
want to hear your quick thoughts on these questions aimed at what the future and what is the future uh, gonna look like or should look like. All right. So, first question, in 10 years, what skill will be more valuable than most people realize?
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Curiosity, number
Okay.
one. And the ability to follow up, the ability to say, I saw what you asked for. Here's what I did. How did I do? Kind of that feedback loop. I think those things.
Mm, yeah, you went a total different way. I
Oh,
thought you were going to
sorry.
jump straight to no, no. I thought you were going to jump straight to like a technology kind of thing, but it's a more fundamental kind of aspect
I think so.
that drives the
Yeah.
technology and the thinking and the application. Yeah,
Mhm. I think so. The more that we're gonna be using AI, we are right now. And so the question becomes, how well can you work well with all of your different types of coworkers? And that
right.
ability to listen, and then the ability to take that and actually start producing something out of that is it's not easy, but it's a very important thing. And that starts with curiosity.
All right. Um, what's one technology people are overhyping?
AI is definitely overhyped right now, both in terms of the damage it's doing and the good it's doing and things like that. What's going to happen increasingly is people are just going to use it. It's going through an incredibly, how should I put it, quick version of the Gartner hype cycle. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
But if folks don't know what that is, the Gartner, Gartner hype cycle, look it up. It's been a hype cycle that's been around for dozens of years and for a long time. So take a look at that. I think there's my short answer. I don't mean to discount it at all. Um, don't let your fear or your sense of wonder get in the way of just saying, okay, I'm just going to start learning it. Because the more you start learning,
yes,
you'll take AI out of the hype sector and you'll start using it. And again, you're applying the tech. And to me, all good technology is applied in a good way rather than just theoretically talked about.
yes. What's one technology people are underestimating?
Oh man, that's such a tough. I've been thinking about that one. The technology that people are underestimating. You could say first of all, human skill and the human ability to adapt, I think gets underestimated, right? But another, if you want to get it into the actual technology itself, um, people underestimate the ability to use automation technology, things like I mentioned earlier, containerization, Kubernetes, and the foundations of things like DNS and IP addressing. We underestimate the importance of that. We've seen it over the years. Not too long ago, late last year, an entire region of AWS was brought down because of a simple DNS issue.
Hmm.
Another time, it was brought down by a simple permissions issue. We underestimate the importance of those foundations.
Hmm. All right. Last one. What mindset should every young professional develop starting today?
Always be learning. Always don't get too proud of what you've learned in a sense. I mean, that's great. You've got an achievement, but always be ready to learn new things. That's uh, that's the 100% thing. Too often I've seen workers who have 30 years of 30 years into a profession. They might have 30 years of knowledge in one very narrow area, but not enough in other areas. So always be learning
Right.
in as many of these tech pillars, data, cybersecurity, networking, as endpoints as much as you can.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Stanger, thank you for spending time with us. And
Ah,
more importantly, thank you for bringing a global perspective to our island conversation. I really appreciate you being on the Innovate Guam podcast. I appreciate you coming in February to the ACTE summit. We really benefited from your perspective, your
oh,
ideas, and your experience. So thank you so much.
well, it was just fantastic. The enthusiasm towards learning and the sheer sense of wonder that I got from the instructors and their interest in wanting to learn new things was so refreshing. So it really reinvigorated me. It kind of changed a lot of the way I've been thinking lately. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So if any of the listeners want to like contact you, learn more about you or stuff at CompTIA,
Hmm.
can you share with them
You bet.
how they can contact you or how they could point them in the right direction to get more information?
You bet. First, you can contact me via email, jstanger@comptia.org, the letter J and then Stanger at comptia.org. You can Google me and join me on LinkedIn if you want. Be careful. There's quite a few James Stangers out there, frighteningly enough. One of them is my son who works for AWS, so you can connect with him if you want. But I'm James Stanger in Seattle working for CompTIA. Join me on LinkedIn. So that's another way to do it.
All right. Well, um, I know I learned something today. To my listeners, I hope you learned something today. This episode really can be a wake-up call and an
Oh,
opportunity. Guam is not too small to matter
nope.
in the technology ecosystem. In fact, our strategic position makes workforce readiness even more critical. People say it over and over again. Guam's geography is the gift that just keeps on giving. So we've got to leverage that. Dr. Stanger, thank you for helping us shape a great conversation. Um, and to my audience, please tune in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on all social media platforms, including Substack. Don't forget to check out my um, Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. And to my audience, as always, whether you're at work, at home, or at school, always innovate. Thank you.